This is Will Friedle, the voice of the future Dark Knight, Batman Beyond, and you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app. And remember a few things. First, Dana deserves better. And second, I am Batman.
His name is Zeta. He's kind, gentle, and also a top-secret military weapon. But he's made a decision.
I will not destroy anymore.
Now, with the whole world chasing him,
Please help.
he's on the run with his only friend.
I'm equipped with a built-in credit card. I can generate as much money as I need.
You are so taking me shopping.
The Zeta Project.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 217 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal. With me, my good friend, good brother, the man that runs our Twitter account. That's right, it's Liam. Liam, welcome to yet another edition of the DCAU Review. And boy, we got an interesting one today.
That's right, Cal. This is another trip into the DCAU's future. And unfortunately, that doesn't just mean Batman Beyond anymore for our show, as we have reached the point where Zeta and the Zeta Project, the spin-off of Batman Beyond, has entered into the equation. And so from here on out, we'll be alternating Batman Beyond and Zeta when we do these trips to the DCAU's potential future here. And we've got the second ever episode of the Zeta Project today, entitled His Maker's Name.
That is correct. And Liam, this episode originally aired back on February the 3rd, 2001, meaning that we just passed the 21-year anniversary of this episode debuting. And before we get into discussing our four categories today, we, of course, have the official Internet Movie Database Synopsis, brought to you by The Pod Tower. Head over to youtube.com/The Pod Tower. You can check out our full catalog of back episodes, including the very first episode where Zeta debuted on Batman Beyond and our first review of Zeta. Check those out in the archives at youtube.com/The Pod Tower. Plus, you can also get some great content from other DCAU creators.
That's right, Cal. And this is the synopsis for His Maker's Name, which was written by Hilary Bader and Bob Goodman, directed by Tim Maltby and Bob Davies, with music by Christopher Carter and animation by O. And that synopsis reads as such. Z and Ro find one of Zeta's creators, Dr. Arroyo. They hope he can help them on their quest.
That's it.
That's all.
All right. Well, yeah, hopefully he can help them on their quest. You know what I like about that synopsis? Short and sweet, like I hope this episode will be. Well, Liam, this as we do a quick recap here for this episode starts off with kind of just where we left Z, as he is once again on the road with Ro, and they are still trying to piece together the last information that was downloaded into Zeta's brain at the end of last episode. If you remember, it was an incomplete download, and he's trying to figure out how to locate the makers that worked on the project, the government project specifically, so that he can hopefully figure out how to get to them to then help him not be tracked by the government, essentially. I think Incredible Hulk, instead of except of looking for a cure, he's looking for a way to remove this tracking way that the government tracks him. So as they continue on the road here, Ro remarks that he's not talking very much, but that they need to stop off and get some refreshments. Not only that, but hopefully find some additional data about some of the people in the photo that he's looking through. And Liam, they have to go to where else but the net.
Hey. If I knew the conversation was going to be so riveting, I'd have brought a book.
I'm sorry. I was studying the data from the file I retrieved.
It's all right. Just remember you have a human with you now. We kind of like to talk now and then.
I'll remember.
Any luck?
I've identified the names of some of the scientists who built me, but there's no information about where to find them. Maybe some of them are in less classified work now. I could search for their names on the net.
Don't need a heavily guarded government computer this time?
No, this data would be...
Good. Switch off autopilot and take the next exit. Ground wire. One in every town.
If you recall, we talked about this last week. The prediction that the World Wide Web, the internet, would only go by the shortened name, the net, is one of those predictions that didn't quite come true. But they go to an internet cafe or a net cafe, and, looking for some more information and access to the internet. Why Zeta, this supercomputer robot, doesn't have built-in Wi-Fi? Again, I think that's another swing and a miss here. Wi-Fi, I guess, wasn't readily available back in 2002 or 1 or whatever this was. So I guess that makes sense that they didn't think that internet would be flying through the air in the future, 50 years in the future, whatever 50 years from now is. But so as they go into this internet cafe, of course, the hijinks happens and Zeta orders Ro the wrong drink, and he combines drinks together because he's a robot and he's silly and he doesn't understand things. So they are able to get some information about a potential lead. And as they're driving past this laboratory in this city, or driving to this laboratory in this city, they notice there are some protesters standing outside. And this actually was a prediction maybe that did come true. And that is these very stereotypical hippies, I would call them. That's probably not politically correct these days.
Excuse me, I believe the term you're looking for is spacies, Cal?
Spacies, I apologize. That is the term that they use, spacies. The spacies are concerned about space being accessible for all and not just for the rich, which, hey, that's a pretty on the nose modern storytelling.
Ironically, I was watching this episode on Amazon Prime, so there you go.
Thanks,
yes,
Jeff.
that's one in the DCAU future predictions they got right. It's the seeming as space travel becomes more of a reality for regular folk, those regular folk gonna need to be rich, and that seems to be one they got right among the net cafes and needing to be hardwired into something to be on the internet that they got wrong this week.
Indeed. I will say there is a bit where Z once again blows his cover in an attempt to save a dog from being hit as they're in this new city also. And Ro reminds him that he's not blending in and actually calls him Superman. She says, way to blend in, Superman. So
yeah, it's a real Nuns and Dynamite situation here, as they just walk out of the internet cafe after they've finally completed this hologram and can see all of the pictures of the people that have allegedly worked on Zeta and created him. And in the process, they walk outside and there's a dog in the street, and we go from there. And then, as you mentioned, that leads them from getting that information. They find this Dr. Arroyo, and they send him, or they head to his working facility, which, as we mentioned, is now this sort of space traveling company. And Zeta and Ro need to find a way to get past the security at the front gate there, and find a way inside to try and locate this doctor.
Yes, so there's some hijinks that ensues here also. We have figuring out how they're going to get in. Z decides he's going to get in and go in by himself, but Ro protests and says that he's going to need a translator just in case. So she decides that there's a way for her to get in, and Z has an idea, and that is that he's going to have her stand on his feet, and she's going to pretend to be I don't know, he's a woman of larger carriage, and that way Ro can provide some sort of guidance to him should he get into trouble. Again, more hijinks ensues as we get some comedy bits here. Well, when they get in and they begin to get into the system, they set off some alarms. An attack robot shows up and attempts to stop them and sees them as intruders. Obviously, they're not supposed to be there because for some reason, Z decides once they're inside, they don't need a disguise anymore. Why would you need a disguise when you're trespassing, right? Just go back to your normal human forms. So the security robot shows up, and I did like Z was like, he's just a robot. He's just doing what his programming tells him to do. And Ro reminds him, well, that's what they say about you. And then she asks him to talk to him robot to robot as in an attempt to appeal to him, which does not work. So Z has to disable the robot and through more hijinks escapes, pretending that Ro is one of the species outside that was protesting, and escorts her out. And they actually end up escaping with the group of species in their futuristic Volkswagen space bus thing, and make their way back just as the government arrives, and all of the agents arrive there as they discovered that after hearing reports of a robot saving the puppy, that they needed to arrive here and check out what was going on. So they arrive, and unfortunately, they're a bit too late as Z and Ro make their escape and decide they're going to hide out with the species just for a little while at least.
We believe that humanity's destiny lies in the stars, but that destiny can only be shared by all if the technology is free. Meanwhile, we soar the galaxy with our minds until the day we can leave the planet for real.
I'd say that ship left long ago.
Look, we don't know who you guys are. We know she got caught trying to sneak into Dairon, and none of us are sure where you came from. Bodhi over there thinks you're an alien. Anyway, you're in some kind of trouble. It doesn't take a genius to see that.
Apparently not.
As long as you need a landing pad, you're welcome here with us.
Yeah, that's right. That's the only thing resembling like a B plot in the whole episode. It's just occasionally we cut to Agent Bennett and Agent Michael Rosenbaum and Agent Lauren Tom, who are there. They're just kind of these, especially Agent West, as he's known, is very sort of bumbling in this episode and is constantly being talked down to. But yes, Agent Bennett is able to get to Arroyo and sort of tell him that he needs to help capture Zeta as he's gone rogue. And so yes, as you mentioned, Cal, Ro and Zeta are sort of falling in with the species, and they're talking, and they sort of get the species sort of get their worldview, which is very much, as you mentioned, based on like the hippies of the 60s. All this stuff should be shared with mankind. All these great technological advancements. Ro is a little bit annoyed, and it's not quite feeling the vibe, at least not as much as Zeta is. And of course, all of the species are kind of in Zeta, although they don't know he's a robot. They do sort of suspect that he's perhaps not quite human either. And so Ro at that point decides she's going to go back with some of the species to the compound to do more protesting, and she promises Zeta that she won't go into the facility without him. But of course, as she gets there, what does she find? But she sees good Dr. Arroyo leaving the facility. And so while keeping her promise not to enter the facility, she follows him and actually jumps into his car and claims that she is Zeta and demands that he drive her away. And as they sort of speed away, she alerts him that she's not actually Zeta, but that Zeta needs his help, and that eventually she makes contact with Zeta, who is practicing some yoga back at the house, which is a pretty funny little bit there. And she informs him that the doctor has agreed to meet with Zeta at a certain location, but Zeta, who's a little bit upset that Ro sort of went against his wishes and put herself in danger in this way, tells her that to stay where she is, and that he'll go alone to meet the good doctor. And that's sort of where we set up our final act here, as Zeta and one of his crew comes face to face.
That's right. So they arrive in what looks to be sort of a junkyard, open space. It's not a junkyard. It's just kind of an open concrete place or something. I don't know. But they arrive, and Zeta is actually somewhat excited to finally see Dr. Arroyo face to face. And he realizes Dr. Arroyo sees him and is immediately kind of terrified. We learn, of course, right before this, that Dr. Arroyo had sort of set a little bit of a trap for Z, and that he had been working with the agents in order to create a false narrative that he was willing to meet Zeta there in order to set this trap. So he shows up, and just as Zeta begins walking towards the doctor, he gets him into position, and they spring the trap on him. And it's this device that's basically going to render Zeta, I guess, disintegrate him. I don't know. It was kind of hard to tell what it was going to do. It was going to deactivate and disintegrate him, or partially deactivate and disintegrate him, or something. So this thing is activated while Dr. Arroyo is still in it, by the way. He somehow ends up in the middle of it, and it's sort of blowing things up as it's closing in on Zeta. It's shrinking, and with Zeta in the middle in an attempt to capture him. And as the doctor continues to run away, they land on some sort of explosives thing. There's just a pile of explosives there that blow up, and Zeta actually saves him, Dr. Arroyo, from the explosion. In the meantime, Ro has realized that because Dr. Arroyo set this up on his terms, that she realized that it could be a trap in all of this. So just as Zeta has saved Dr. Arroyo, and Dr. Arroyo decides this explosion that happens blows a hole in whatever piece of technology this is that they're using, which allows Dr. Arroyo and Zeta to escape the ever-closing net. Dr. Arroyo sees Zeta's compassion and decides to help him at this point. So he pulls him into his car, and as they're attempting to escape from the agents seemingly catch up with him, but just in the nick of time, the Spaceys arrive in their space Volkswagen bus and block the way and intervene and say that Zeta, whom they believe might be an alien, needs to phone home, and this allows Dr. Arroyo and Ro and Zeta to escape the agents at this point. And we have a little bit of an ending where Zeta finally gets to talk to Dr. Arroyo. And
the man you want to find is Eli Selig. Dr. Selig was the genius behind you. He programmed every line, got his hands in every system. If anyone can convince people you're not a killer, it's him.
Dr. Selig.
How do I find him? That's the hard part. He's moved on to another project, even more classified than you. Where he lives, how he moves, the government keeps all that secret.
Then what are we supposed to do?
Selig's not as big on staying hidden as his keepers would like. He crops up now and then, speaking here, consulting there. Watch the net. You'll find him.
Come on. Sounds like we got a long road ahead.
Where do you think we should start?
Let's hit the next ground wire. You can start searching the net, and I think I'm going to try another root beer cherry cola.
I have to say, the more I learn about you, the more I'm confused.
Get used to it. You're with a human now.
Dr. Arroyo says that he actually doesn't have a whole lot that he can share with Zeta, unfortunately, because he was kind of a low man on the totem pole. But he points him in the direction of an Eli Selig, and that's the man that he needs to go to next. And Zeta wants to know exactly how he can find him. And Dr. Arroyo kind of gives him some conflicting information in that he's hard to find, but he's not that hard to find because he's doing deeper, darker, secret projects for the government now, but he tends to pop up here and there to give consulting work and public speeches, apparently. So he kind of points him in the right direction, and that's how we wrap our episode up with the adventure continuing, I suppose, with both Zeta and Ro back on the road again.
Yeah, very, as you mentioned at the start, and I think we talked about this in our first Zeta review, kind of what the original idea for this series was very much meant to The Fugitive or the Incredible Hulk series, where you just, you come to a new town, you meet some locals, you get into some trouble, and then you leave the town and you're on to the next adventure. So I think that's kind of what happens here. And I think it's a fine story as far as pushing that plot forward, and Zeta being on track. You have a lot of lighter with the Spaceys, especially Zeta interacting with them and all of that stuff, and some of the other hijinks as Zeta and Ro are trying to sneak onto the compound and things like that. So I think this is a good, easy watch. I ended up settling on a 6 out of 10 for my plot. I think it's fine. It pushes forward, the overarching story for Z and Ro as they continue to try to unravel this mystery and find out who Zeta's creator is. So, yeah, a solid job, I thought, of pushing this story forward and having some fun along the way.
All right, I wavered between a few different scores here, and the average was quite lower than you gave it. What I settled on was not quite lower, but I varied between 2 and 4 on this one, and ended up settling on a 4 for my score. But I did not like this episode at all. I thought that it was incredibly boring for all of the high stakes that was supposed to be happening. And as we mentioned, I believe when we reviewed our first episode of Zeta, we have no emotional connection to this show. It is not written for an adult audience, that's for sure. It's not even written for a kid audience with, adult themes here and there. It is a children's cartoon. And I thought it was just too formulaic. I know that the great Hilary Bader was responsible for writing this episode, mm-hmm. and she had high highs and a few lows in her writing over the course of her DCAU writing. Some episodes we've loved that she's responsible for, and a few we did not love that she was responsible for. So this one just goes into that pile of not great. And I think some of the goofiness, and we can talk about it. We'll talk about it definitely when we get to visuals next. But this does not even feel like the same universe as Batman Beyond. Like not even close to the same universe. Nothing looks the same. Nothing feels the same. And I know that famously, director Bob Goodman, responsible for the character and the story in the original Zeta episode, wanted this to be a darker show. This show so it's not his fault necessarily. It was the direction of the network that wanted to take it into a lighter area. But with the space hippies, like, can you imagine space hippies being in Batman Beyond? Like, that doesn't, like, maybe a one-off character that talks like them, but a whole group that have a Volkswagen bus and that hang out and are, have peace signs taped all over their stuff. Like, I was like, what are we watching? What am I watching here? So yeah, I didn't love it. I thought it was way too formulaic. The plot, as you mentioned, the B plot of the show is this like 3-minute detour that they take to the hippie house, and they hang out there, and Zeta learns how to do yoga. And it's also that they can do this one gag where Zeta puts his legs behind his head. Didn't like the episode. Not for me, not my cup of tea. I think it's fine probably for a children's cartoon to enjoy, for maybe a couple of gag laughs here or there, but boy, just not my cup of tea.
I mean, I'm not like strongly disagreeing with everything with much of what you're saying, despite our scores being too far apart. Like I said, I think the bones of the story are there as far as, like I said, for what they're trying to do, which is we kind of putt the ball a little further down the green as far as Zeta learning more about his creators and what he has to do to gain his freedom, and along the way you meet some wacky characters. I thought it was fine. I thought it was a fine adjustment, and maybe I'm grading on a curve because my expectations are the floor for this series. Like I didn't have any expectations going in, and we'll talk about it later. I think the voice acting also helps this show out because that's probably the area where it shines the most. But as an episode, it's not a great, compelling, action. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of urgency to the action scenes, even at the end when it feels like the agents have Zeta dead to rights. It doesn't feel like it's, that big or that epic of a moment. But overall, like I said, I think it does its job well enough, which is to kind of just kick the can down the street as we continue this sort of season-long arc of Zeta trying to track down his creators.
All right, Liam, let's move on to our animation and visuals. And I believe you said Coco was responsible for the animation for this week. Right off the bat, ironically, I feel like the category that we go to and is the easiest to talk about because it's a cartoon, it's a visual thing that we're watching. And I think this is the category that I have the least amount of notes about. I think the one note that stands out to me that I have written here is Zeta humps robot into submission.
Okay, I did have that as well.
Okay.
Yeah, there's pretty graphic.
There's a pretty graphically awkward moment where the intruder robot, the security robot at this facility, the space travel facility, as we mentioned, he gets bested by Zeta, and he's sort of shaped like, I don't know, a child's toy horse or something, like similar in just like the way that he looks. For whatever reason, they decided to animate him being Zeta, jumping on the back of this robot, and then indisputably there is an animation of his hips moving up and down on it as if he is physically humping this robot into submission. And I wasn't sure what was going on. Just absolutely and totally bizarre choice to do that. I will also say I did not care for so many of the vehicle designs. Again, I know, I get that it's a different artist, it's different, everything about the show just doesn't scream futuristic cars. It feels like a weird zany sci-fi show, and the vehicles, and there's so many of them in this episode, it does not feel like it's the same universe that we have seen Batman Beyond in. And it's not even like Batman the animated series versus the new Batman Adventures swap. This is like it just feels like a completely different interpretation of what the future is going to look like, which is fine, but it just doesn't feel like this is supposed to be the same future, and it doesn't feel like that. After humping the robot into submission, I didn't have a whole lot of stuff written down here that I loved. I will say that, of course, Zeta gets to use a bunch of different disguises, which is fun. And when he gets to be the pregnant woman that walks in with Ro on it while Ro is hiding with him, that was a funny gag. But that's all pretty much that I had for visual and animation. What about you?
Yeah, the only other bit I would add is the sequence where it has to stop the flying car from hitting the dog, I think is funny. One, the dog's owner looks like Supergirl. I was like, that's interesting. And then I thought when she that bit there where it's not that exciting of a sequence, Zeta like fires his extendo hand. And it's funny because I thought it was a mistake in the animation, because he fires the robot hand, but then you look back and you can see his hand still like firing. And I was like, oh, well, shouldn't it just be a tentacle? But then I realized you could actually see like where the hologram was ending. So he's still hologramming that he has a human hand. He's just shooting his actual robot hand out of it. So it's like, oh, that's kind of cool that they put that extra attention to detail into that. But yeah, other than that, I think that sequence is all right with him sort of digging his heels in, and you see the sort of the ground start to break around him, and then the end bit there where they put like the electrified cage around him and it's sort of closing in. That's all right, and that's kind of and him sort of jumping away. And then my other note for visuals is that the explosions used were just it's Superman the Animated Series explosions, it's Batman the Animated Series explosions, including the creeper explosion a couple of times. Like it was just like, wow. Like I knew they reused explosions a lot of these shows, but I think especially coming to using it for a show that has such a different animation style, I was like, oh, that was so clearly a Superman explosion or a New Batman Adventures explosion. I thought that was kind of funny as well. So all things considered, again, perhaps grading on a curve because of the animation style. I do think you have a good point about the design of the vehicles and the design of the backgrounds and everything, because this is theoretically supposed to be the same world. So even though the architecture can certainly be different because they're not in Gotham City, obviously, you would think that at least like cars would look sort of similar, and the cars in Batman Beyond all have this sort of, you know, Blade Runner sort of neo grimy future look to them. And then here it's just like, it's a Cadillac, but it's floating.
Right.
It's a Volkswagen bus, but it's floating. Like there's not as much attention to sort of make these look like these weird future grimy future vehicles and things like that. So I ended up just giving visuals a middle of the road 5 out of 10. I don't think there's anything in here that's offensive other than the robot humping, but other than that, nothing particularly great, nothing particularly terrible. So I just settled on.
Yeah, I ended up giving it a 4 out of 10, just a point lower. The disturbing visual of the robot humping and then the cars really got under my skin, and just that there was a lack. This show, I feel like, because it's aimed at children, it's going to suffer as we go through this series. It's going to suffer because they don't have as many action-packed moments of fist fights happening. So it's more like the old Super Friends, where you have there's like a laser battle that occurs between the agents and Zeta, and he's jumping around and has to escape. And I get that they don't want him to be a violent robot, so maybe part of that feeds into that as well. But it removes some of the action and some of the intrigue in the actual show if you don't break up the dialogue and the funny moments with some action beats. And this episode felt very light on the action beats, with really the only one coming with the culmination of the episode, and that having very low stakes, it felt like. So and I think that was reflected in our scores. All right, Liam, well, that will bring us to our next category, which is going to be music. And I didn't catch who did music this week. I did not catch that.
It was a Twitter friend of the show, Christopher Carter. So one of the 3 dynamic music partners at work here with Mr. Carter. And I have to say, I don't have much in the way of music. I did note it in the sequence where the electric cage is first sort of put up and it begins to close in. I thought there's some good like dramatic music there. But I think my biggest note was that there's like a lack of music. There's not a lot of action, and in most of the talking scenes, there just isn't music. So I feel like there wasn't much chance for Mr. Carter to kind of stretch his legs, so to speak, and really give us much here. Although, I mean, I'm sure we probably talked about this in the first episode, but has there ever been a more like 1995 nightly news piece of music than the theme song this show?
Yeah, I don't remember if we talked about it or not, but spot on. Yes, definitely nightly news inspired. They're ready for your local news anchor to stand it with his arms folded as the music plays. I would say, yeah, I had a few different notes for music. I would say that there's like a weird, dumpy, strange theme that plays when they go in disguise, when Ro and Zeta go in disguise as the heavyset woman sneaking in.
Pretty nifty. But what about me? Can't go in there yourself. You might need a human to Z translator.
Can you stand on my feet?
Haven't seen you before.
First day.
Sure you should be working?
Why? Do you detect a malfunction?
There's like this weird, it's just a like dumpy synthesizer sound that kind of follows her as she's as they walk in, and as Zeta sort of slips up over his words and can't respond in proper English, and then Ro is like under his shirt, like trying to get his attention to get him to stop talking. So that one, and then there's like a theme inside the agent's mobile headquarters that comes in pretty strong. It's like just this, it's not quite generic sci-fi, but it's just sci-fi music is how I would classify it, with more synthesizers, and kind of has this this memorable tune to it. And it again plays a little bit later in the final and the culmination when they set the trap as well. And I think that, along with I think that and the music when they trap Zeta sort of swells and in a couple of different parts there. But it wasn't I don't think that there was anything that was necessarily earth-shattering, and it didn't seem like there was a lot that was asked potentially for Mr. Carter in this episode. But I did like a couple of those pieces that played, and I did make note of them, which is maybe why my visuals, I was listening more than watching this week, I guess. So I ended up giving music a 6 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I went just 1 point lower. I went 5 out of 10. Yeah, definitely some good stuff there. I could have used, like, if we're really leaning into this, space hippie thing, I feel like you could have used some sort of retro sort of 60s style music when we get to their little hideout there. But no, as it stands, certainly some fun to be had there, as you mentioned, but nothing, like I said, not a lot of opportunity, because this show, or at least in the first couple episodes, I feel like is in the most of the dialogue centric scenes, it really, the music lays out almost entirely, maybe even more so than in Batman Beyond or some of our other shows. So it is it's interesting, and that's something we'll have to make note of as we go forward, if that's a regular thing or just something kind of as they're finding their footing in these early episodes.
There we go. All right, Liam, let us take a turn to our final category of the day, which is going to be voice acting. Not a huge cast for this week, but nice to revisit, as we've only covered this series once before, but nice to revisit the series regulars here. Let's talk about this week's voice cast.
That is right, Cal. We have a lot of familiar names that aren't really getting to do very much. We have Tara Strong, briefly, as she's one of the Spaceys, Vega, I think they say her name is. Of course, as I already mentioned, we have Michael Rosenbaum as Agent West, and Lauren Tom as Agent Lee, and the great Kurtwood Smith playing Agent Bennett, whose role is really quite reduced. As we said, there's only kind of a couple brief scenes of him sort of, making Agent West nervous. He doesn't really get a lot to do in this episode, so I feel like maybe that hurt it a little bit too. We didn't really have our one and only like true villain of the piece is kind of on the back burner this week, so he doesn't get as much to do there. But elsewhere in the cast, we have Miguel Sandoval as Dr. Arroyo, Ethan Emery as Bodhi, and Timothy Dang as Scruffy, who I don't think we mentioned, but one of the guys looks like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo, and his name is Scruffy. So that's a cute little bit there. But yeah, our really, if we're talking about voice acting and really this, I think maybe like the biggest strength of this show by far, and unsurprising, because of course we once again have Andrea Romano to thank for the voice direction and voice casting here. Julie Nathanson as Ro, and of course the great Diedrich Bader as Z. Man, thank God for them, because like there's something I can genuinely say I enjoy about this show. It's them playing off of each other, with Ro being this very sarcastic, quipping, kind of a little bit annoying teenager, and then you have Z being this completely sort of naive and and wanting to learn about the world and wanting to see the good in everything on the other side of that. Like they're quite enjoyable together, I think.
Yeah, they have really great chemistry together, and it was a great, as you said, Andrea Romano's choice to give two great actors the opportunity here to work together and to be the lead. Ro is perfectly cast in that role. She has just the perfect voice for that and is able to inject the seriousness, the sarcasm, the quipping that is required for that character. And then, as you mentioned, with Z's voice, Mr. Bader's just robotic, maybe slightly pitched up voice. It just fits the character well as he sort of is continues to learn the ins and outs of being an actual human being, and fumbling along the way and enjoying himself, and just the innocence that he gets to portray as that character. So yeah, lots of fun, and definitely good chemistry between the two of them. And I think the thing that stands out for the episode by far, absolutely, and I imagine what we'll continue to enjoy throughout the series here, but I will say that there wasn't a lot, or a single line, or wasn't a whole lot asked, I feel like, of the cast, because a lot of it is just exposition that's broken up in between with these comedy bits. And so there's not a lot of acting that's required. For those reasons, I ended up giving voice acting just 6 out of 10. It's good. I think it's above the 5 out of 10 because of our two leads and their chemistry together, and the work that they put in for these characters. What about you?
Yeah, I ended up giving it the exact same score, 6 out of 10. I like the interplay kind of at the start of the episode when she asks him to get her a drink, and she gives a couple different options, which he takes to mean that she wants all of those drinks mixed together. And then there's a bit later where when Z is explaining to Ro what these species want and what they believe, and she's kind of she makes some crack about, well, yeah, they want that and I want a lifetime supply of chocolate, at which point Zeta very quickly produces his magic credit card that that he can use to buy her whatever she wants, and she has to sort of explain that it's a freedom of expression. There's a lot of fun, like I said, the heart of the show, and I think what absolutely is the best part of it, at least through 2 episodes that we've reviewed so far, is Mr. Bader and Miss Nathanson playing off of each other there. So yeah, overall, definitely a thumbs up for both of them as our leads this week.
Absolutely. Well, with that, Liam, I believe that we'll wrap things up for this week's episode. Totaling up my scores, I end up with a split right down the middle, a 20 out of 40. What about you?
Yeah, I'm a couple points higher here. I ended up with a final score of 22 out of 40. So yeah, I think it's pretty solid as far as it's hard again when we get into rewatchability here, because yeah, this show has an overarching plot. So if you're watching this show so far, it's hard to say that there's an episode you can skip. At least, again, we're only 2 in, so maybe as we get into it, we'll find some side adventures that you can kind of cut out. But as of now, this sort of pushes the plot forward for Z as he's looking for his creator. We learn sort of his main creator, Dr. Selig's name at the end of this episode, and he's off on his adventure. So yeah, I think this is a 1 thumb up for Zeta. As we've talked about, Zeta as a whole, this show doesn't have a great deal of effect on the overarching DCAU, other than there is a 1 more, technically 2 more crossover episodes between him and Batman Beyond. But yeah, other than that, there's not a lot to write home about as far as affecting the larger canon of the DCAU. But yeah, for this show, if you're watching this show for some reason, you can probably get a 1 thumb up for rewatchability, because it not only follows up on the pilot episode, but like we said, pushes it forward to him now learning his sort of true creator's name.
Yeah, I guess a 1 thumb up. If we could give half thumbs, I'd give it a half thumb, because I really think, based on the fact that the only thing that you need, this episode is just 20 minutes of, I feel like, spinning your tires, and then you finally catch a little bit of something and you get going at the end here when you learn his creator's name. It's like, do you need to watch 20 minutes of an episode just to learn the creator's name, or can you fill in the blanks, on the next episode? You can probably fill in the next episode blanks, but without having seen the entirety of the show, this is sort of I guess we'll wait and see. As far as, will I ever watch this episode again? I can't think of too many reasons why I would ever watch this episode of this particular program again, unless I do a DCAU review podcast in another 30 years or something with you. So I'm gonna say a reluctant one thumb up for this as well.
The old Orange Cassidy thumbs up, you might say.
Yeah, exactly. Crossover. All right, Liam. Well, that will begin to wrap us up for this week's episode. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Don't forget, if you're looking to support us, there's a couple different ways you can do that. You can follow us on social media at DCAU Review, both on Twitter and Instagram. If you are one of those few but loud Zeta Project fans that are out there and you follow us, let us know. Is this an episode that you feel like has to be watched in a rewatch of this show? Tweet us at DCAU Review or send us a slide into our DMs on Instagram at DCAU Review. While you're there, why don't you give us a follow? Also, if you're looking to support us, you can subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app, Apple Podcast, Google Podcasts, Spotify. If you listen to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and can take the time to leave us a review, we would love that. And if you're listening on Spotify, you can answer this week's poll questions. Those are up there for you. Spotify exclusives at that. And then, of course, if you are looking to support us with your hard-earned dollars, we greatly appreciate that. We understand it's not easy these days to be able to do that. So for those of you that do that, we are incredibly thankful. And you can do so by either following the link at the bottom of the podcast on Anchor or on your podcast app. You can also head over to DCAUreview.com, pick yourself up a piece of merch. Or, as we mentioned at the top of the podcast, one way to support us without giving us money directly is to subscribe to the Pod Tower on YouTube. So youtube.com/the Pod Tower, and watch our videos, like our videos, and tell your friends about our show. Liam, we are continuing here with our future month next week as we turn back to Gotham, and we will be reviewing our next episode of Batman Beyond.
That is right, Cal, and we'll be picking up in episode order with our next episode of Beyond, and that is another pretty, I think a pretty memorable one we got to talk about, entitled Where's Terry?
A mystery.
That's right. We got some fun elements there as we get to delve into seeing Bruce Wayne and Max have to sort of pick up some slack when the Batman of the future has gone missing. So definitely something to look forward to. Something maybe we can all sink our teeth into a little bit deeper next week when we get to that review.
Excited to check that out with you, Liam. But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Adios.